The rain mixed with the metallic taste of her own blood as she collapsed on the cold Chicago asphalt. Her husband had thrown her away like trash, leaving her to die. But as the headlights of a phantom black SUV cut through the dark, the city's most feared monster stepped out, offering her a bloody crown. The freezing November rain of Chicago felt like shattered glass against Martina Russo's skin. She lay on the wet, unforgiving pavement of a narrow alleyway just off the Magnificent Mile, staring up at the starless sky. Every breath she took felt like inhaling fire, her ribs protesting with a sharp, blinding agony. The taste of copper pooled in her mouth, a grim reminder of the brutal backhand that had sent her spiraling into the concrete. Just minutes ago, her reality had fractured beyond repair. Her husband, Julian, the man who had sworn before God and the sprawling hierarchy of the Romanello crime syndicate to protect her, had proven himself to be her most lethal enemy. For years, Martina had endured his quiet cruelties. She had swallowed his snide remarks about her plus-size figure, enduring the humiliation when he looked right through her at syndicate galas, opting to parade around women who looked nothing like her. Julian had always treated her curves as a burden, a flaw he had to tolerate because her father had been a respected earner before his death. But Martina was never just a pawn. Beneath her soft, full figure and quiet demeanor lay a brilliant, eidetic memory and a spine forged from steel. She was the one who quietly fixed his ledger discrepancies. She was the ghost in the machine keeping Julian from ending up in a shallow grave. Tonight, she had finally confronted him. She had walked into his private office at the back of their River North nightclub, only to find him with Priscilla Vance. Priscilla, the icy, rail-thin heiress of the Vance trafficking cartel, was everything Julian thought he deserved. With sharp features and a soul as hollow as a drum, Priscilla had looked at Martina not with guilt, but with utter disdain. Martina could still hear Priscilla's venomous laugh echoing in her ears. "Look at her, Julian," Priscilla had sneered, adjusting her silk-slip dress. "You really let this heavy, pathetic cow balance your books? She belongs in a bakery, not a boardroom. Dump her, or the Vance family pulls our supply lines." Martina had stood her ground, demanding respect, demanding the loyalty she was owed. She had calmly told Julian that if he left with Priscilla, she would walk away and take the access codes to his offshore accounts with her. She thought her leverage would protect her. She was wrong. Julian had not hesitated. His fist had struck her with the force of a freight train. He dragged her by her hair out the back door, away from the prying eyes of the club-goers, and threw her into the freezing alley. As she tried to stand, he kicked her in the ribs, his face twisted in a snarl of pure hatred. "You think I need you?" Julian had spat, the rain plastering his dark hair to his forehead. "You think some fat, arrogant bookkeeper can hold me hostage? Priscilla is a queen. You are nothing. You have always been nothing. I kept you around because I pitied you. Keep the codes, Martina. You'll just carve them out of your skull once you crawl back, begging for mercy." Then Priscilla had stepped out into the alley, sheltered by an umbrella held by a bodyguard. She looked down at Martina bleeding on the ground, a triumphant smirk playing on her lips. "Leave her, Julian. The trash collection comes on Tuesdays. She won't make it through the night anyway." They had driven off in Julian's Maserati, the tires spraying dirty street water over Martina's broken body. Now the cold was seeping into her bones, numbing the pain, but replacing it with a terrifying lethargy. Martina knew what this meant. If she closed her eyes, the hypothermia and the internal bleeding would claim her. She refused to cry. Tears were a luxury she could no longer afford. Instead, she focused her mind, bringing up the rows of numbers, the routing sequences, the exact coordinates of every illicit dollar Julian had stolen from his own bosses. She clung to her hidden strength, her unmatched intellect, plotting a vengeance she might never live to execute. A sudden flash of high beams blinded her. A sleek, armored black SUV crawled down the alley, coming to a halt just inches from her limp body. The engine purred like a massive dormant beast. Martina braced herself, assuming Julian had returned to finish the job. Instead, the heavy door swung open, and the atmosphere in the alley shifted. The air grew dense, suffocatingly tense. Heavy footsteps splashed against the puddles. Martina forced her swollen eyes open. Towering over her was not Julian, but a man who made Julian look like a terrified child. Rocco Galli, the boss of the Galli Syndicate, the apex predator of the Chicago underworld. Rocco was a myth woven from blood and gunpowder, a man who had allegedly dismantled an entire rival faction with a straight razor and a lighter. He was ruthless to the world, a phantom of violence with piercing dark eyes, a sharp jawline dusted with stubble, and a presence that demanded absolute submission. He stood perfectly still in the torrential rain, his expensive tailored suit soaking through, unbothered by the cold. He looked down at her, his expression unreadable, a blank mask of lethal intent. Martina tried to push herself backward, her survival instinct screaming at her to run, but her body betrayed her. She let out a choked gasp of pain. Rocco crouched down smoothly, his knee resting on the filthy wet concrete, ruining his trousers. He reached out with a large, scarred hand. Martina flinched, expecting a blow. Instead, his touch was impossibly gentle. His warm fingers brushed the wet, matted hair away from her bruised cheek. His jaw tightened, a dangerous muscle ticking beneath his skin as his dark eyes catalogued her injuries. "Julian Rossi did this to you," Rocco said. It was not a question. It was a death sentence. His voice was a low, gravelly baritone that vibrated in her chest. Martina could only nod, her teeth chattering uncontrollably. Rocco shrugged off his heavy cashmere overcoat. Without a word, he draped it over her shivering, full figure, wrapping the lingering warmth of his body around her. The coat smelled of cedar, expensive tobacco, and pure, intoxicating power. "You are bleeding, Martina," he murmured, slipping his arms beneath her knees and behind her back. "I'm fine," she wheezed out, her stubborn pride flaring even as she hovered on the edge of consciousness. "I can walk." "No, you cannot," Rocco replied calmly, "and you will never walk in the gutters of this city again." He lifted her effortlessly, as if her weight was nothing to him. For years, Julian had made her feel heavy, cumbersome, and unwanted. In Rocco's arms, she felt weightless, anchored only by his iron grip. He carried her to the SUV, where his lieutenant, a scarred man named Enzo, quickly opened the back door. "Where are we going?" Martina whispered, her vision beginning to fade to black as the luxurious warmth of the vehicle surrounded her. "Home," Rocco answered, pulling her against his chest as the door slammed shut, blocking out the unforgiving city. "You are done being a pawn in a dead man's game." When Martina next opened her eyes, she was enveloped in a softness she had never known. The scent of rain and blood was gone, replaced by the faint aroma of lavender and medical antiseptics. She blinked against the dim, warm light, realizing she was lying in a massive, king-sized bed draped in silk sheets. The room was expansive, featuring floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the Chicago skyline, the dark waters of Lake Michigan, stretching endlessly into the horizon. She tried to sit up, but a sharp sting in her ribs forced a hiss through her teeth. "Do not move," the voice came from the corner of the room. Martina turned her head to see Rocco Galli sitting in a high-backed leather armchair, half hidden in the shadows. He had changed into dark slacks and a black dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle and intricate, sprawling ink. He was watching her with an intensity that made the breath catch in her throat. "Where am I?" Martina asked, her voice raspy. "My penthouse," Rocco said, stepping into the light. He approached the bed, bringing with him a glass of water and a small white pill. "The syndicate doctor left an hour ago. 2 fractured ribs, a minor concussion, severe bruising, hypothermia that you barely survived." He handed her the glass and the pill. His fingers brushed against hers, lingering just a fraction of a second longer than necessary. "Why?" Martina asked, staring at the glass before looking up into his dark, fathomless eyes. "Why would the head of the Galli syndicate save the wife of a Romanello captain? I'm useless to you. I am just—" Julian made sure I was nothing. Rocco took the glass from her after she drank, setting it on the nightstand. He leaned closer, resting his hands on the mattress on either side of her, trapping her in his commanding presence. His gaze dropped to her lips, then tracked down the curve of her neck, lingering on the fullness of her chest beneath the borrowed oversized silk shirt she now wore. There was no disgust in his eyes. There was only a dark, burning hunger, heavily restrained. "Julian Rossi is a blind, arrogant fool," Rocco said softly, his tone laced with a terrifying quietness. "He looks at gold and sees dirt. I have been watching you for a very long time, Martina." Martina froze, her heart hammering against her bruised ribs. "Watching me? I know who fixed the Romanello ledgers when their East Side warehouse was raided," Rocco continued, his eyes locking onto hers. "I know who diverted the feds by creating a ghost trail of phantom shell companies in the Caymans. I know about your eidetic memory. You possess a mind that could run this city, wrapped in a body that I find absolutely mesmerizing. Yet you let a pathetic rat like Julian cage you, insult you, and break you." Martina's cheeks flushed, a mixture of shame and an unfamiliar, thrilling heat. "You think my body is mesmerizing?" The words slipped out before she could stop them, her insecurities bubbling to the surface. "Julian said I was a burden. Priscilla called me a cow." Rocco's jaw clenched so hard she heard his teeth grind. "Priscilla Vance will not have a tongue by the end of the week," he stated matter-of-factly. "And Julian will die begging for a mercy I will not give him. You are not a burden, Martina. You are a goddess of war, masked as a gentle wife. Every curve of yours is perfection, and I will carve out the eyes of anyone who tells you otherwise." Martina stared at him, overwhelmed by the raw, unhinged protectiveness radiating from a man known as the city's most ruthless butcher. "Why are you doing this? What do you want from me, Rocco?" "I want everything," he replied smoothly, lifting a hand to cup her face. His thumb traced her unbruised cheek. "I want the codes in your head. I want your brilliance working for the Galli family. And I want you, Martina, by my side. Not hidden in a back office, but at the head of the table." "I am still married," she whispered, though the word tasted like poison. Not for long, Rocco promised, a dark smile playing on his lips. Julian broke the rules of our world when he left you in the street. By the laws of the syndicates, his claim on you is forfeit. I am claiming you now. You are under my protection. You are untouchable to the Romanellos, to the Vances, and to Julian. Martina felt a sudden, profound shift within herself. The scared, neglected woman who had begged for Julian's scraps of affection had died in that freezing alley, sitting in the bed of a mafia boss, looking into the eyes of a monster who treated her like a deity. She found her hidden resilience roaring back to life. She did not want to just survive anymore. She wanted to reign. I have the routing numbers for the Vance cartel's main laundering hubs, Martina said, her voice dropping to a cool, clinical whisper. Julian and Priscilla have been skimming off the Romanello boss for 6 months. I hid the evidence in a cipher only I can read. If I hand it over to you, you can bankrupt the Vances and execute a hostile takeover of Julian's territory in 24 hours. Rocco's eyes flared with dark delight. He leaned in, his lips brushing against her ear, sending a shiver straight down her spine. My beautiful, brilliant girl, he murmured. Give me the numbers, and I will give you the city on a silver platter. I will crown you my queen, and those who made you bleed will drown in their own. Martina closed her eyes, the pain in her ribs dulling as the intoxicating rush of power and vengeance took hold. I want to watch them fall, Rocco. You will, he swore, pulling back to look into her eyes, sealing their dark pact. We burned them to the ground together. For 3 days, the penthouse became a war room. The massive mahogany dining table was covered in encrypted laptops, burner phones, and architectural blueprints of the Romanello and Vance territories. Martina sat at the center of it all, an oversized cashmere sweater belonging to Rocco swallowing her upper half, though it did nothing to hide the soft, generous curves of her hips and thighs. She typed with blinding speed, her mind a steel trap of routing numbers, ghost accounts, and offshore shell corporations. Rocco never left her side. He handled the street-level logistics, dispatching his soldiers to key locations across Chicago, but his eyes constantly drifted back to her. The men of the galley syndicate, hardened killers and seasoned enforcers like Enzo, treated Martina with absolute reverence. Rocco had made it clear. She was not a guest. She was the architect of their impending victory. She was their queen. Are you sure about this sequence, Martina? Enzo asked respectfully, pointing a scarred finger at a sprawling schematic on the screen. The Vance cartel routes their supply money through 3 different fronts before it hits the Caymans. If we hit the wrong one, they will bleed the accounts dry before we can freeze them. Martina did not hesitate. Her fingers danced across the keyboard. They use a rotating cipher based on the Fibonacci sequence, tied to the date of their founder's death. Julian thought it was brilliant, but he is lazy. He reused the same algorithm for the Romanello skim. If I input the counter-virus now, we sever Priscilla's access to $80 million, and we simultaneously dump the ledgers, proving Julian's theft directly onto Don Romanello's private server. Do it, Rocco commanded, his voice a low, vibrating hum of anticipation. Martina pressed the enter key. A progress bar flashed across the screen, filling rapidly. Within seconds, the green text turned red. Access denied flashed on a simulated mirror of the Vance accounts. The $80 million was gone, swallowed by the galley syndicate's impenetrable financial black holes. Checkmate, Martina whispered, leaning back in her chair, a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration washing over her. The room erupted into quiet, dangerous smiles. Rocco dismissed his men with a sharp nod. As the heavy mahogany doors clicked shut behind Enzo, the massive penthouse grew silent, save for the patter of sleet against the floor-to-ceiling windows. Rocco walked up behind Martina. He placed his large, warm hands on her shoulders, his thumbs tracing the line of her neck. The sheer physical presence of the man made her heart hammer against her ribs, which were finally beginning to heal. He leaned down, his face buried in the crook of her neck, inhaling her scent. "You just dismantled a 30-year-old trafficking cartel with a few keystrokes," he murmured, his breath ghosting over her skin. "You are magnificent." Martina leaned back into his touch, allowing herself to feel the strength of him. For years, she had shrunk herself, trying to take up less space, trying to apologize for her cis and her intellect. With Rocco, there was no shrinking. He demanded all of her, worshipping the very things Julian had despised. "They will come after us now," Martina said, though she felt no fear. "Julian will panic. Priscilla will realize she is ruined." "Let them panic," Rocco replied, turning her chair so she faced him. He knelt before her, bringing himself to eye level. He took her hands in his thumbs grazing her knuckles. "Tonight, the Romanello family will declare a bounty on Julian's head for stealing from the Don. Priscilla will try to flee the city, but she has no money to pay her guards. They will run to the only place they feel safe." "The nightclub," Martina realized, her eyes widening. "The River North Club. It has a fortified panic room in the basement. Julian always kept a stash of untraceable diamonds and passports in a wall safe down there." Rocco's dark eyes gleamed with a predatory light. "Exactly. And we are going to be there waiting for them." He stood up, pulling her gently to her feet. He looked down at her full figure, his gaze traveling over her with a fierce, possessive hunger that made a deep heat pool in her stomach. "I had something delivered for you," he said, gesturing to a sleek black garment box resting on the leather sofa. Martina walked over and untied the silk ribbon. Inside lay a breathtaking, custom-tailored trench coat in deep burgundy velvet, paired with a fitted black dress designed perfectly to accentuate her curves rather than hide them. Beneath the clothes lay a heavy, cold piece of steel, a compact, pearl-handled automatic pistol. "You are a galley now," Rocco said, stepping close behind her, his chest flush against her back. "You do not cower in the shadows. You walk into the fire, and you let them see exactly who burned their empire to ash." Martina traced the velvet of the coat, a new, unbreakable resolve hardening her spirit. She was done bleeding in alleys. Tonight, she would wear her scars like armor. The River North nightclub was ominously silent. The pulsing bass and neon lights that usually spilled onto the Chicago streets were dead. Rocco had bought out the local police precinct for the night, ensuring a 3-block radius was entirely deserted. Black SUVs surrounded the perimeter, blending into the shadows. Inside the club, the air was thick with the smell of spilled liquor and stale cigarette smoke. Martina walked through the main doors, her burgundy trench coat sweeping the floor, her heels clicking sharply against the hardwood. Rocco walked half a step behind her, a silent, towering leviathan of violence, flanked by Enzo and 4 heavily armed soldiers. They bypassed the empty dance floor and descended the concrete stairs to the basement. The heavy steel door to the panic room was ajar. Inside, chaos reigned. Julian was frantically tossing stacks of cash and velvet jewelry bags into a duffel bag, his hands shaking violently. Priscilla stood near the wall safe, her usually pristine blonde hair disheveled, her silk dress stained with sweat and dirt. "Hurry up, you idiot!" Priscilla shrieked, clutching her phone. "My father is not answering. The accounts are completely wiped. We have to get to the private airstrip before the Romanello hitmen find us." "They are already dead, Priscilla." A calm, chilling voice echoed through the room. Julian dropped a stack of diamonds, spinning around. Priscilla froze, all the blood draining from her sharp, aristocratic face. Martina stood in the doorway, a vision of dark, regal power. She did not look like the broken, weeping woman Julian had kicked into the gutter. She looked like an empress. And behind her, stepping into the dim light of the panic room, was Rocco Galli. Julian's knees buckled instantly. The sight of the apex predator of the Chicago underworld standing as Martina's shadow shattered his mind. "Galli," Julian stammered, backing away until he hit the concrete wall. "What are you doing here?" Martina walked into the room, her presence commanding the space. "You left me to die, Julian," she said, her voice steady and devoid of pity. "You told me I was nothing. You told me to keep the codes. So I did. I kept them, and I gave them to a man who knows what they are worth." Priscilla let out a hysterical, breathless laugh, trying to mask her terror with her usual arrogance. "You? You think you did this? You are just a fat, pathetic bookkeeper." "Galli, whatever she promised you, the Vance cartel can double it. Just let me walk out of here." Rocco's expression did not change, but the air in the room dropped 10 degrees. He drew a sleek, suppressed handgun from his shoulder holster with terrifying speed. He did not aim for Priscilla's chest. He aimed for her knee. A sharp, spitting crack echoed off the concrete. Priscilla collapsed, letting out a blood-curdling scream as her kneecap shattered. She writhed on the floor, clutching her leg, her arrogant sneer replaced by sobbing agony. "I told you," Rocco said, his voice a dead, emotionless void. She would not have a tongue by the end of the week. But a knee is a good place to start for insulting my queen. Julian fell to the floor, crawling toward Martina, tears streaming down his face. "Martina, please. Please, baby, I am sorry. I was out of my mind. The pressure of the syndicate. Priscilla manipulated me. You know I love you. You are my wife." Martina looked down at the man she had served for years, feeling nothing but a profound, absolute disgust. He was small, pathetic, and weak. "I am not your wife, Julian," Martina said coldly. "You broke your vows when you left me bleeding in the rain." She turned her back on him, walking over to Rocco. She placed her hand on his chest, feeling the steady, reassuring beat of his heart. Rocco looked down at her, his eyes softening only for her, a silent question passing between them. She gave him a single, definitive nod. Rocco raised his weapon. Julian screamed, raising his hands, but the suppressed shots were quick, precise, and absolute. 2 hollow-point rounds found their mark, and Julian Rossi slumped against the safe, lifeless. Enzo stepped forward, looking down at the sobbing, bleeding Priscilla. "What about the Vance girl, boss?" "Leave her," Martina commanded, her voice ringing out with absolute authority. Enzo paused, looking to Rocco for confirmation, but Rocco merely smiled, stepping back to let Martina lead. "Leave her," Martina repeated, looking down at the ruined heiress. "Let the Romanello hitmen find her." Let her explain to Don Romanello where his money went. She is nothing now, Priscilla sobbed, begging them not to leave her, but her pleas fell on deaf ears. Rocco wrapped a heavy, protective arm around Martina's waist, pulling her flush against his side. They walked out of the panic room, leaving the ghosts of her past bleeding in the dark. As they stepped out of the nightclub and into the crisp, freezing Chicago night, the rain had stopped. The city lights reflected off the wet pavement, a glittering path laid out before them. "You handled that like a true boss," Rocco murmured, kissing the crown of her head. Martina leaned into him, inhaling the scent of cedar and gunpowder. "I had a good teacher." Rocco stopped by the open door of the SUV, turning her to face him. He cupped her jaw, his dark eyes blazing with an obsession that would never burn out. He leaned down and captured her lips in a fierce, consuming kiss, sealing his claim on her flesh and soul. It was a kiss that tasted of victory, of blood, and of an unbreakable bond forged in the darkest corners of the underworld. "You are my untouchable queen, Martina Galli," Rocco whispered against her lips, "and this city belongs to you." Martina smiled, a genuine, powerful smile. She had walked into the alley a broken pawn, but she walked out as royalty, forever reigning by the side of her brutal, beautiful monster. Did you feel the tension and dark romance of Martina and Rocco's gritty underworld journey? If you loved watching the underdog rise to become an untouchable mafia queen, smash that like button and share this story with your friends. Drop a comment below telling us your favorite moment, and do not forget to subscribe to our channel for more high-stakes, gripping mafia romance dramas. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a thrilling new tale.